Hello. Ran into a friend of mine yesterday at the flea market. He was selling some copies of C.S. Lewis, the Narnia Chronicles, the books, and I'd read those years ago. And I mentioned, that I'd read them, but that when I found out that they were religious allegories, that kind of bothered me, because Lewis was, a devout Christian, and apparently that was his purpose for writing these books, that Aslan the lion was symbolic for Christ. So, I don't know, disappointing to find that out when you're older, that there was some kind of ulterior motive behind the book that you enjoyed when you were a child. Now, all those guys, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, and who's the other one? Olaf Stapleton. They all were in schools in England, when they were young, and they each grew up to write fantasy and science fiction. Stapleton was more science fiction. And there were other people that are somewhat related to that fantasy, the trilogy sort of thing. When Tolkien's trilogy started selling, they looked for more trilogies. They found E.R. Edison, Worm Ouroboros, and they found Mervyn Peake, Gormenghast trilogy. And just as an aside about the Gormenghast trilogy, I actually find that quite interesting. Tolkien, on one hand, when I was young, I read The Hobbit about 12 times. Read The Lord of the Rings about 9 times. Oddly, I don't remember that much about it. I tend to remember the names. He studied language and words, so that's kind of where he was coming from, creating these words from, a lot of times, antiquated languages and things. And he apparently turned up years later in his papers, his notes about, stories that he was writing, which no one had really grasped. And that was that he never had anything happen. So in the books, they're wonderful to read, but nothing ever happens. There's never any battles, never any confrontations, never anything like that. But the reason why they're interesting is because they are really verbal descriptions of scenes, pictures. Could be paintings. Maybe he was an artist, and didn't paint, so he described these scenes in words. So that's actually a good way of approaching creating paintings and images, is not to start by drawing a line, but to start with words. So, fiery chasm, emitted flame, and in the flames there were blah, 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 things like that. You might not come up with that by applying the pencil first. So anyway, one thing about fantasy, whether it's fantasy novels or gaming and things like that, it's not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that in moderation, because we've always had myths and legends, monsters, Medusas, and so on, that weren't real. So in a sense, they were fantasies, but they usually had a deeper meaning, a significance, a message, a moral message. So that's what I try to do in the stories I write for Erie, for example. But moral fable. So anyway, when it comes to our culture and this focus on fantasy, some people will see something that's fantasy, whether it's, gaming or Dungeons and Dragons or a Netflix series or something like that. And the appeal of that is like a candy bar, because it's like, ooh, this isn't reality, which I hate. So let's dive into that and stay there. And like I said, the difference between myths and legends, centuries ago, and the fantasy we have today is that some people will dive into it and they will never, ever escape, never come out of it. Why? Because, often they don't have personal relationships in reality to draw them out, to give them something else to focus on. So that's something to think about, you know. And of course, we know this gets taken too far, and I think the people that know it, that do it, may know that they're taking it too far. They may call themselves geeks and nerds and things like that, so that, you know, they won't be insulted, because we're already insulting ourselves. We've adopted the word like queer, you know. So anyway, so there's a danger there. It interferes with life because it interferes with personal relationships, and you wind up getting stuck in a fantasy world. So anyway, that's that subject. And the next one is about service. Now, there are all kinds of people in the world that, you know, advertise themselves as being in service, you know, whether it's, you know, charity or a politician or a doctor or, you know, Mother Teresa or churches, you know. It's like, we are in service. And, well, where exactly does that begin and end? So if you imagine a spectrum, where it's like at one end of the spectrum, you're completely self-serving. You know, some people might call that a narcissist or a toxic personality disorder of some kind. And at the other end, you are completely in service to other living beings. At the far end of that spectrum could be, for example, a gray alien who, according to some accounts, they basically say that they have no identities, they travel the universe in service. So anyway, service, say for example, a church. So people can belong to a church, and it's like, well, we're serving our religion, we're serving Christ, and we're serving each other. But we're also serving ourselves, because we believe that we have the right answer because of the name of our church, you know, and other churches basically have it wrong. So they might think they're serving, but there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of, you know, it's a social club. It's a way for people to back up each other's beliefs and things like that. And it's been said of religions that, you know, a good way to be religious is basically to keep it completely to yourself. Don't talk about it. Don't advertise it. No bumper stickers, no t-shirts. And just simply make it personal. Because what happens when you begin to advertise it and make statements and proclamations and moral posturing and so on, is that you turn this idea basically into a weapon. And this has happened throughout history with all kinds of religions. You turn the religion into a sword and you begin to chop people up. Could be the pro-life movement, you know, or wars in the Middle East, or, you know, just going back centuries. It just goes on and on and on forever. So anyway, the society that we live in and the way that people are treated as children and young people, it's no wonder that they fall into this trap of trying to promote themselves, serve themselves, because we kind of taught them to do that. We teach competition, you know, and as soon as you begin to compete with others, well, what are you doing? You're serving yourself. So this is a lesson that is can take a lifetime to learn. Again, to go back to indigenous cultures, usually a group would serve each other. That's basically what they did. They were all in service to each other, never to themselves. And that really worked out the best. They had no crime. They didn't need money. So anyway, but I've talked about that at length before. So anyway, it's a good question, because how much are you serving yourself and how much are you serving others? And I've been quite guilty of being at the other end of the spectrum, serving myself through my career, which is similar to what a lot of other performers do, whether they're in art or music or movies or whatever. There aren't too many that don't do that. But anyway, as I said, we're sort of coached and coerced and conditioned into doing that. So what else? One thing I was going to say about technology, because I saw a big long branch out here. It was almost perfectly straight like a spear. I just wanted to pick it up. It's like, this is a spear, you know. It was fairly heavy, fairly thick. Just like I walked along with it, feeling the weight of it, and it's like, I want to throw this at something. So when I got to a clearing, it's like I aimed, I threw it. Did pretty good, remained on a straight path, stuck in the ground. And but I realized, it's like, wait a sec, I could have thrown it a lot harder and a lot further if my arm had been twice as long, right? And that's what a spear thrower is. So spear throwers are what the Aborigines use in Australia to basically elongate the length of the arm and increase the range and the power of the spear being thrown. And technically, that is technology. Perhaps one of the most simple technologies, maybe one step above fire making. So it's interesting because I stumbled across a magazine the other day, picked it up for almost nothing because there's a reason why I did. I won't go into why, but it's like as I began thumbing through it, it's like, wait a minute. This is all advertising for arms industries, basically automatic weapons for people, geared toward young people, basically, and all presuming, having this idea that there's some kind of disaster coming, social chaos, and you're going to have to defend your shit, shoot people, you're going to be getting shot at, and you're going to need these weapons. And of course, these companies may be making money from this stuff, but as we know, these weapons wind up getting used in school shootings and things like that. So they can say, guns don't kill people, people don't kill people, but, they're supplying the guns. So it's not the same thing as a pistol. These things are insanely powerful, massive weapons. So anyway, I think that's it. Fantasy, service, and technology. And of course, the thing about technology, the spear, it's like, okay, you got to the spear thrower level. Do you stop here or do you keep going? It's beneficial to keep going, keep developing forever, as what we're seeing now with AI. So anyway, you can develop your technology forever and say, for example, you get to the point where you've got anti-gravity spacecraft and things like that, and synthetic bodies that last forever. Well, what do you do then? Well, travel the universe in service, of course. And the whole circle turns into a loop, closing the story. So I'll leave it there. Bye-bye.